ever-increasing amount of anime released each and every season, it gets harder and harder to keep track and watch all the anime you want to watch. It's so easy to miss one or two which might have turned into your favorites, and I'm here today to help you with that. And what better way to do that than a tier list ranking every new anime that's being released this season. Before getting into it, I will have to give a few disclaimers. This video will only feature full-length non-sequel series. So no sequels like ReZero and Dr. Stone, and also no short-form series with only 5 or 10 minutes per episode. I have double and triple checked to see if I've included everything, so if I've missed something, I do apologize. Also, since we are only partway through the season, I obviously can't rank the seasons based on their entire runtime. So, for fairness sake, even though a bunch of these have already released a second or even third episode, I would rank them based on only their first episode. If you want me to do the same video for future seasons, please do leave a like and comment, as it helps me know you guys enjoy this type of video. Now, without further ado, let's get started. And what better way to start off this video than Agent of the Four Seasons. The so-called Agents of the Four Seasons each bring with them their respective season. Hinagiku, the Agent of Spring, disappeared 10 years ago, taking spring with her. However, she has now returned to restore the cycle to its proper state. This is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most beautiful looking anime of this new season, with a really vibrant art style. The interactions between Hinagiku and her guard Sakura also really sold me on the series. And to be honest, it shouldn't really be a surprise. Although this series wasn't on my radar before the season started, it does have the same offer as Violet Evergarden, and that vibe really comes through in episode 1. So, if you enjoyed Violet Evergarden, I do encourage you to give this a try. I am really looking forward to future episodes, so this goes into S tier for me. Up next, we have a similarly beautiful show, at least art style wise. Set in an all-girls musical school, 100 scenes of Awajima follows those girls' way to stardom, including all their dreams, aspirations, worries, and problems. Although judging any show based solely on their first episode is tough, I feel like this is especially true for this show, considering it needs to introduce a rather large cast of characters. Nonetheless, episode 1's serene vibes along with its amazing background music sold me on this. It goes into A tier for now, but could definitely go higher with more episodes to come. We've now already had 2 very good shows in a row, but if you were expecting that streak to break here, you'd be dead wrong. In Akane-Banashi, Shinta Arakawa is aiming to pass the Shinichi exam and become a master in the traditional art of Rakugo. However, after failing the test and getting expelled without an explanation, his daughter makes it her mission to prove her father's performances are worth the title of Shinichi. Now, if you don't know anything about Rakugo, let me explain what it is real quick. One sole performer sits down on stage and tells a story by playing several different characters. This might not sound like the most entertaining thing to watch, but the way the animation brings the storytelling to life has really sold me on the concept. To add to that, I really like the character design, and the first episode got me really invested in the overall plot, so this is an easy S tier for me. Now, what would a season of anime be without some classic Villainess anime? And always a catch is just that. Maria Anovatsi loses her spot as heir and is thus sent to live in a neighboring kingdom. As is tradition with otome anime, she then gets dumped by her prince fiancé at a party. However, didn't know she was engaged and didn't even know the person who claimed he was engaged to her. This is a pretty interesting twist on a classic setup, and as with most otome anime, I do enjoy the main character. However, I do feel like we got a better version of this very anime just a few seasons ago, and may I ask for one final thing. Overall, I just wasn't really impressed with the overall production quality of the show, so I can't put it any higher than C tier. However, all of you Villainous anime fans, don't fret. This very next anime, an observation log of my fiancé who calls herself a villainess, is sure to satisfy your needs. Bertia is reincarnated into her favorite otome game, but not as a heroine. Instead, she gets reincarnated as a villainess, fully aware of that role, determined to move the story along the way it was supposed to be. But that doesn't really seem to work. Honestly, this show is exactly what I want from my Villainous anime. It has a beautiful art style along with some unique characters that have really nice chemistry with each other. And that's without even mentioning that there were several scenes genuinely had me laughing out loud. Although the genre in general is so tropey, this is a pretty refreshing take on it, so it goes into A tier for me. As someone who is now attending university myself, a show that really appeals to me is Botan Kamiina fully blossoms when drunk. Botan, after entering university, encounters Ibuki, her dom's leader. She drinks for the first time, gets a taste for alcohol, and then spends her time trying all different kinds of it. I'm so glad we also get this kind of anime. Cute girls do cute things anime are usually set in high school, so not only is this being set in university refreshing, it also allows this unique drinking twist. Overall, this just ticks all of the boxes of a good slice of life show. Cute vibes, a gorgeous art style, and overall just a pretty likable cast of characters. Bonus points for making me feel like this is not just Yuri bait, but will actually commit to it. Overall, a nice and comfy show, A tier. Back into the realm of fantasy, we have Daemons of the Shadow Realm. The twins, Yuru and Asa, separated after an assault on the village, must reunite to control supernatural creatures called Daemons in order to save the world. To many of you, this art style might seem very familiar. That's right, the manga this show is based on was written by the same mangaka that wrote Fullmetal Alchemist, so that alone might be a reason for many of you to pick it up. Talking about episode 1 itself, it was a very action-packed episode. In general, it did catch me off guard a lot with its developments. Being set in modern times, with helicopters and guns, was something I didn't expect at all, for example. Unfortunately, I must say the episode did feel quite fast paced at times, and it didn't manage to hook me the way I hoped it would. That's why it goes into B tier. We've already had an anime about the performing arts this season, so why not add one about another art form? Koichi Asakura dreams of studying at an art school, but that plan gets shaken up a bit when he sees graffiti on a museum wall painted by Eren Yamagishi, who has decided not to pursue art despite her clear and obvious talent. The setting point of this show is clearly meant to be Eren. The show is named after her after all. But while she is a very unique main character, episode 1 honestly made her seem more insufferable and unhinged than anything. The premise is cool, and it is admirable that the mangaka has partially funded the anime to make sure it was as good as it could be, but it is just a bit too edgy for me. Unfortunately, it has to go into C tier. Speaking of a cool premise, even a replica can fall in love. It's one of the coolest premises I've seen in recent times. When she was 7 years old, Sunao created Nao, a copy of herself. Sunao then makes Nao do all the things she doesn't want to do, like going to school and writing tests, while she stays at home all day. That arrangement gets a bit more complicated though, when Nao, despite being a mere replica, falls in love. The contrast between the two personalities is quite fascinating, and although I assumed it would just be a flow situation, it feels more like multiple personality disorder. Unfortunately, not unlike Eren the Southpaw, it has a weakness that makes it so I can't personally rank it higher than B tier. I just don't really gel with the main characters, which prevents me from really getting invested into the show. If I'm being honest, the new anime this season I was looking forward to the most was Gals Can't Be Kind to Otaku. The title and synopsis might have you wondering why. Takia is a quiet otaku who tries to keep a low profile at school. That is, until two gyarus from his class start talking to him. These three couldn't be more different from each other, and yet they still start to bond over shared interests in anime and games. But while that might not sound like the most interesting premise, it's the characters and interactions that really carry this show. I might be biased because I am caught up with the manga, but I adore these three and the way they help and support each other. Easy S tier for me. Unfortunately, we now have to move from one of the best to one of the worst anime of the season. Ghost Concert Missing Songs. Here is 2045 and singing is forbidden, with an AI system being responsible for creating music. Saris Aiba accepts these rules, but this all changes when she randomly hears a real human singing. Now that by itself could make for a pretty interesting show, but the way it was executed just made the concept fall completely flat. Episode 1 felt all over the place, almost like the author tried to cram the ideas of several different shows all into one. All in all, it was just a quite confusing experience. The music and overall quite solid production did save it from going into the lowest tier, but I can't put it any higher than D tier either. I've noticed in previous seasons that retro anime art styles are somewhat making a comeback, and this season is no exception. Nakamura, a shy boy, falls in love with his classmate Hirose. There's only one problem: they have never spoken to each other. Quickly skimming through this description before watching episode 1, I somehow must have missed the BL tag and thus was quite surprised to find out it was yaoi. And maybe it's just because I don't watch much of that genre, but seeing the usual high school rom-com behaviors in this context made them somehow feel refreshing. The interactions between our two main leads are also just very cute, and I adore the look and feel of the show. Into A tier it goes. Continuing on with a trend of high school anime, we unfortunately have what is in my opinion the worst anime of the season, in Haibara's Teenage New Game Plus. Natsuki Haibara thought his high school years were a complete failure, but then he suddenly wakes up as a freshman again, determined to rewrite the failure of his school days. Calling it the worst anime of the season might feel a bit harsh, but to be honest, there was nothing redeeming about this. Every trope and plot point here has been done to death, and this show adds nothing new or unique to that. In fact, I feel like the way it executes on those tropes is just really poor. The fact our main character feels more interesting and likable in his past life speaks volumes. The only sort of saving grace is the sort of cute scene with the profile pictures at the end, but even that is enough to save it from F tier. For a second cute girls doing cute thing anime this season, we have Ichiyoma Mankitsu Gurashi. This one, however, is not quite as good as the previous one in my opinion. Meiko Mota is chosen as a special transfer student to a prestigious all-girls school, but she's quick to discover that her student dormitory is also a manga cafe with a pretty unique cast of characters. However, while the interactions between characters are cute and all, there's nothing really special about it that will keep me coming back. On the other hand, there also isn't really anything bad or anything you can criticize about it, so I guess it goes into B tier. First, guys can be kind to Otaku, and now I made friends with the second prettiest girl in my class have made me realize I have a soft spot for this type of romance anime. Mai Haramaki is the epitome of a loner not making any friends in high school. That is, the so-called second cutest girl in class, Asanagi-san, takes an interest in him. And again, this is honestly a pretty generic setup. And here, the animation art style aren't even anything to write home about. Yet, against all common sense, I still really enjoy this. The two main characters' chemistry is just really nice, their interactions are fun to watch, and I'm just really invested in how the relationship develops. So sue me, but I'm putting this into A tier. Alright, we gotta address the elephant in the room at this point. Just how many high school rom-coms are there this season? I know it's a popular genre, but I don't feel like there are usually this many. And obviously, we have to have another one with I Want to End This Love Game. Childhood friends Yukiya and Miku play the love game since grade 6. They both take turns saying I love you to each other. Whoever gets flustered first loses. They're now in high school and the game is still going on with neither willing to give up. Now, this premise is pretty cool, and in my opinion the best rom-coms are the ones where it's just two idiots head over heels for each other, which this show is the epitome of. In that regard, it actually reminds me a bit of Kaguya-sama. However, I think these two already walk the fine line between cute and insufferable, and without a good sidecast, I don't know how bearable the show will be. However, my biggest gripe with this, and I can't believe I'm saying this about a rom-com, is the production quality. The animation is pretty bad, overall the show is just very static, sometimes they even use CGI for the characters moving and walking around. All that taken into account, I can't put this higher than C tier. While this next one isn't a high school romance, Kill Blue still takes place in a high school. Juzo Ogamu is a legendary hitman, but after successfully completing a mission, he gets stung by a bee and passes out. When he wakes up, he has suddenly been turned into a 13-year-old boy and is tasked with infiltrating a high school. What I was immediately impressed with was the main character still actually acting like an adult. It is too often the case in scenarios like these that the main character then suddenly starts acting like a child. Speaking of the main character, I thought he was pretty interesting, and actually wanting to study makes him immediately stand out. Other than that though, I thought this episode was quite decent, but nothing special or really worth talking about. So this goes into B tier for me. Now, for a possibly more unique genre, although I have seen some other detective anime, we have Kill Again Mr. Detective. Sakuya Otsuki is the son of a legendary detective wanting to follow in his footsteps. However, Sakuya isn't your regular high school student. Instead, he has the ability to revive every time he gets killed, which he uses to solve cases. Episode 1 was honestly pretty fun, especially with the interactions of the two main characters, and I was also pretty impressed with the first detective case, although how good the show will be will depend a lot on how good the future cases are. And maybe this is just bias, but I was burnt enough by the last detective anime that had a good first episode, that I personally can't put this higher than B tier. But naturally, we're not done yet with high school romcoms. The protagonists of Kirio Fanclub, Aimi and Nami, two high school girls, don't have anything in common. Well, except for one thing. They both have a crush on Kirio. So naturally, they have to compete to see which one of them loves Kirio more. Now, this premise didn't really wow me. I thought this was just gonna be another classic love triangle. However, as I watched the episode, I found myself really enjoying the interactions with Aimi and Nami. Like, yes, in theory, it was all a romantic rivalry, but it just felt like watching two friends goof around. There were actually some pretty absurd and funny gags in there, but what really sold me on the show was the end. Revealing that Nami actually has feelings for Aimi, not Kirio, really adds another level of interest to it. Therefore, it goes into A tier. Next up, we have a pretty weird show, honestly. In Kujima, Why Sing When You Can Warble, Arata Koda discovers a weird, bird-like creature called Kujima and brings it home to live as part of their family. What really baffled me the most is how almost all of the family accepted this weird creature into their home with barely any questions. Looking past this, the character interactions are pretty nice to watch, I guess, but I personally just couldn't really get into it. The vibes were just sort of off all throughout the episode. I just had this nagging feeling that the episode would take a dark turn at some point. It just never happened. And without that, it's just a chill show with nothing really going for it. It goes into C tier for me. Moving on with a show in Kusonoki's Garden of Gods, which kinda feels like it should be an isekai, but isn't. Minato Kusonoki is assigned to manage his family's haunted estate. Luckily, his high spiritual power has purified the place, making the house a peaceful place for yokai and deities to spend their time. Although I get that this is supposed to be a very cozy anime, I was unfortunately just quite bored all throughout. It didn't help that the animation also looked off at times. Overall, if you're looking for a slice of life with some cool yokai designs, this might be a show for you, but I cannot put it any higher than C tier. I'm sure there's a very specific subset who are really looking forward to this next anime. But for those who aren't familiar, Liar Game, now Kansaki, released a letter inviting her to the Liar Game along with 100 million yen. After getting tricked into giving away her 100 million to a former teacher, she employs con artist Shinichi Akiyama to survive this game. I've seen quite a few people talk about this manga, but I am surprised it is getting adapted considering it finished publishing over a decade ago. The premise to this is pretty interesting, but where Akiyama is a pretty exciting protagonist, same cannot be said for now. Although her actions are necessary to set up the plot, she's naive to an extent that it detracts from the watching experience. The animation was also pretty bare bones, but I did still like episode 1, so it goes into B tier. Continuing on with a bit of an old school vibe, we have Mao. Nanoka, a regular high school student, is drawn to an abandoned passage of storefronts. After going through it, she gets transported to the past, where she meets the titular character Mao in a ghost town. Together, they investigate the mysterious happenings around them. If the art style of the show is familiar to you, don't worry, it should be to most. The manga was written by Rumiko Takahashi, famous for her other works such as Inuyasha, Urusei Yatsura, or Rama 1/2. I was really digging episode 1, especially with the amount of mysteries it set up, which really made me continue watching. It did feel quite similar to Inuyasha vibes, but overall I did like it, so it goes into A tier. For some anime, the premise sounds so ridiculous that you can't read out the description without cracking a smile. Marriagetoxin is one of those. Hikaru Gero, an assassin specializing in poison, teams up with a cross-dressing marriage swindler to find a wife in order to prevent his lesbian sister from being forced into an arranged marriage. Yeah, but to its credit, the show takes the absurd premise and runs with it. It is absurd in a way that is just fun to watch, delivers the kind of chaotic humor I was looking for. Besides being funny, interactions between the two main characters are also surprisingly heartfelt, and it's backed up by some very good animation. Overall, one of my favorites of the season, that has to go into S tier. But if we're talking about absurd and chaotic humor, It would be remiss not to mention Mistress Kanan is devilishly easy. Kanan, a demon, infiltrates a high school with the goal of devouring some human souls. Her main target is Kyogo Yoji, but instead of stealing his soul, she somehow ends up in a relationship with him, which is made worse by the fact he has never even been on a date. Episode 1 was pretty hilarious, and a lot of it can be credited to Kyogo. I've rarely seen such a bold and proactive main character, and that enables a lot of the funny shenanigans in the show. To be honest, I don't think I've seen such a dorky couple since Girlfriend. I really enjoyed this episode 1, so I'll put it into A tier. Now, you're all probably as shocked as me to find out it has taken this long for us to get our first isekai. And even then, this is probably one of the most unique ones I've seen in recent years. After an untimely death, the protagonist finds himself greeted by a goddess. She tells him he can choose whatever world or scenario to be reincarnated into. There is, however, a catch. The popular scenarios have waiting times of tens of thousands of years. So, to circumvent this, he chooses some more unique reincarnations, like the rib of a hero or a hermit crab. This is a very over-the-top isekai parody with some quality banter between the main character and the goddess. What really impressed me was the art style in general, also the fact that the reincarnation world got another unique art style. I really liked this first episode, but I'll also put it into A tier. If I was asked what I thought the best first episode of this season was, it would be Needy Girl Overdose without a shadow of a doubt. Trying to properly explain the plot of it would probably be a fool's errand. To sum it up, it follows the streamer K-Angel on her way to stardom and all the troubles that come with that. But the exact plot isn't really the series' selling point. For one, it covers some very current social topics like our addiction to social validation of the internet, as well as our worshipping, as well as demonizing of internet personalities. However, what really makes it stand out from the rest is its insanely unique production style. At times, it reminded me of Monogatari with how avant-garde it was. Honestly though, I was glued to the screen for the entire episode, and I'm heavily considering playing the visual novel. So for that reason, it gets a sole S+ tier spot. I've already told you about my favorite, but if you want my pick for the hidden gem of the season, look no further than Nippon Sangoku. Japan was hit by the fallout of nuclear war. The resulting refugees, as well as a pandemic, led to the fall of the Japanese government, country splitting into 3 kingdoms, with technology regressing to that of the feudal era. 100 years later, Aotaro Mizumi plans on reuniting the kingdoms. The first thing that immediately stands out is insanely unique art style. The show already managed to create some striking visuals that stick in your mind in episode 1. It also establishes some very hateable enemies and a larger overarching plot that I'm already quite invested in. And to add to that, it also managed to get me tearing up at the end of episode 1. The contrast between Mizumi's calm demeanor in the confrontation and him bawling his eyes out afterwards is quite emotional. In vibe, it sort of reminds me of one of my favorite anime of last year, Warble, so it goes into S tier. Normally, I'm all for some romcoms that feature working adults instead of high school students, but unfortunately, like is the case for Pardon the Intrusion I'm Home, that alone doesn't make me immediately like it. Rinko, an office worker, just wants to enjoy her anime in peace, but when she tries, her neighbor bangs on her wall. Desperate, she asks her other neighbor for help. However, it turns out that that annoying neighbor is the author of her favorite manga. This initially sounds like a fun premise, there are some funny gags here and there, but at the end of the day, it is about execution. And unfortunately, none of the main characters are even remotely likable. Usaharu gives us abusive vibes. I really dislike how Rinko just lets herself get walked over, which puts me off as well. And even the normal guy gives off major creepy vibes in my opinion. I have to put it into D tier. There is this saying that any type of publicity is good publicity. And if that is true, the anime that is profiting the most of it is Petals of Reincarnation. Toya Senji holds a deep inferiority complex towards his older brother. To step out of his shadow, he becomes a so-called returner, where he uses a talent of his past life by a self-inflicted death. Now, considering all the posts about a certain Adolf I've seen, the show was surprisingly decent. The art style and theming were honestly kinda cool, but that is as far as it goes. The animation quality was kind of underwhelming, episode 1 felt really rushed. My biggest issue with the show is just how edgy it is. Maybe I would have liked it more a few years ago in my teenage years, but as of right now, I can't put it higher than C tier. Imagine your world gets overrun by monsters. You would probably want your savior to be some kind of hero, strong man or woman in order to ensure your survival. But what if that savior was a rooster? Yes, that is the plot of Rooster Fighter. But despite how absurd the premise is, the show kind of makes it work and delivers some pretty decent action. There are also some funny scenes in there. However, the highlight, or I don't know if I can really call it that, were both the first and the last scene. Seeing a rooster and a chicken doing the deed on screen is definitely not on my bingo card for the season. Seeing that same rooster subsequently get cuckolded even less so. However, despite me kind of praising the show, I personally didn't really vibe with it and definitely didn't want to continue watching, so for that reason I can't put it higher than C tier. It is really funny that earlier there was a run of series, all of which I really enjoyed. Now this is the fourth one in a row I didn't really enjoy. In Snowball Earth, Tetsuo helps defend humanity by fighting against monsters in space with the help of his mech Yukio. His mech gets destroyed, he gets sent back to Earth in an escape pod. But while he expects to get a reception worthy of a fighter, all he finds is a desolate world covered entirely in snow. Now, where do I start with this? Episode 1 felt incredibly rushed. It honestly felt like they crammed an entire season's worth of character development into one episode, which might have prevented the ending from hitting as hard as it maybe should have. Even tonally, this episode was all over the place. A lot of the episode had a pretty lighthearted and jokey tone, and then suddenly everyone just kind of dies. On top of that, the main character was just kind of annoying all throughout the episode. I guess the funny facial expressions were a plus point for it, and I honestly can't think of a lot this show did right. B tier. You know, sometimes there are shows where it's just hard to find a lot to talk about. Not because they're bad necessarily, but just because they don't really give you a lot. The Classroom of a Black Cat and a Witch is one of those. Speaker Virgo dreams of joining a magical academy. Unfortunately, she can't use magic. That is, until a mage cursed into the form of a black cat offers her a deal. Help him break the spell in exchange for becoming her mentor. While it is a fantasy, I'd say its main focus is comedy. And to its credit, a lot of the jokes do land. There are some pretty new and creative gags in there. I do like the show, but I didn't really get invested in either the characters or the story, so it's a B tier for me. It is funny, we have two different anime this season focusing on alcohol. Yukata Kansaki, world-renowned wine critic, has passed away, leaving behind his collection worth millions. His will states that whoever can identify 12 wines chosen by him will receive the collection. Competing for the prize are his son, Shizuku, who rebelled against his father, never drank a drop of wine. Issei, a young wine critic whom Yukata had recently adopted as a son. I will preface this by saying that I don't drink wine at all, don't really have any interest in it. Maybe that's also why this show didn't really manage to leave a lasting impact on me. I did like how they described the wines in both a visual and musical sense, and I could see how this appeals to certain people, but unfortunately it really isn't my kind of show, so it lands in C tier. After we have an anime about drinking alcohol, we naturally can't go without an anime about eating food. Suzune Tachibana, a maid, suddenly finds herself stuck in Japan for a year. Naturally, the first and most important thing when you're in Japan for the first time is try out all kinds of delicious foods. These kinds of anime always have delicious looking food. What they really need to do to stand out from others is have some interesting and fun characters on top of that. And this show does deliver on that to some degree. Suzune is fun to watch, and the interactions between her and her neighbor are pretty nice. Visually speaking, this is also just very nice to watch, both when it comes to the food and the characters. Overall, just a very chill and fun show, so it's a B tier for me. Sometimes there are shows where the title gives you a little pause before you start watching. The Klutzy Class Monitor and the Girl with the Short Skirt is one of those. But I would recommend not to judge a book by its cover in this case. Every morning before class, Sakura Daimon forces the dress code at the school entrance, and every morning he stops Poem for her skirt that is, you guessed it, too short. But when Poem discovers Sakura Daimon sucks at studying, they grow closer despite their differences and bickering. The first thing to note here is how pretty this show looks, both in terms of the art style and the animation. What I really like is how not only the two main characters, also, all the side characters are super unique and interesting. The vibes are just really on point here, and this first episode was just fun all around. easy S tier. Now, I promise you, Ramparts of Ice is the last high school rom-com I'll talk about this video. Socially withdrawn Koyuki tries to keep an emotional wall between her and every classmate except for her best friend. However, that all changes when a nosy boy and laid-back boy break through that barrier. Now, the keen-eyed among you might have noticed that another one of this mangaka's works just got an anime adaptation last season. However, the vibes feel much more down-to-earth and serious than you and I are polar opposites. And although this might be an unpopular opinion, I enjoyed this one quite a bit more. Koyuki herself is a really interesting character, and the small glimpses of flashbacks we get do make me very curious about her past. On top of that, even despite the more serious tone, there are some very funny moments in there. So yeah, sue me, but I'm putting another rom-com in S tier. Wow. Just wow. Over 30 anime in, and this is the first and only proper run-of-the-mill new isekai we've got this season. Hibiki is a high schooler who gets reincarnated into a fantasy world with monsters all over the place. Initially, it seems like all his skills are useless in combat, but a chance encounter with a busty elf seems to turn around his fortunes. Now I won't bore you too much with the things here that are also common in most other isekai. Truthfully, there are not too many unique things about the show. I do think it is one of the funnier slop isekai. I like that it doesn't take itself seriously at all. However, the fan service definitely feels very unnecessary, especially considering how young the protagonist is and feels. The show is definitely kind of trashy, so even if it is trashy in a fun kind of way, can't go any higher than C tier. As we come to the tail end of this video, we once again enter the world of fantasy. And the warrior princess and the barbaric king, Seraphina, a fierce knight, expects torture when captured by some barbarians. Instead, her captor proposes to her. Naturally, marrying her sworn enemy is a no-go, but her captor's looks seem to sway that belief. I'm gonna be totally honest, I am not really sold on this. Sure, there are some fun character interactions, but tonally, this show just felt all over the place. Episode 1 was also pretty slow, not the most interesting of premises, so it's C tier for me. Staying in the realm of fantasy, we have what is probably the single most anticipated new anime of the season, with Hat Atelier. In a world where magic is commonplace, Coco has one simple dream. She wants to be a witch. However, she's about to give up. After all, magicians are born, not made. But after witnessing Kifri perform magic, she learns that that fact might not have been true and that maybe her dream of becoming a mage isn't that far away. I love me some good old-fashioned fantasy, and this ticks all the boxes of what I wanted and expected. The characters were interesting, the world building so far is incredible, the story has me hooked from the beginning. But what impressed me the most was the incredible production quality. It was so gorgeous, it genuinely felt like I was watching a movie at points. The soundtrack was also phenomenal, and I'm just incredibly hyped for future episodes. This is obviously an S tier. Now, to end it off, we have the only real ecchi this season. It really does feel like the genre has gotten quite a bit rarer in recent times. High school teacher Hiyori Hiwamura is known in school as a scary teacher. Students believe that if you offend her, she will put a curse on you. But one of her students, Akihito, discovers a secret. She's a total softie who is just deeply misunderstood. This was, all things considered, pretty cute for an ecchi, and there were some pretty funny moments in there. Obviously, didn't really offer anything groundbreaking or special, with your fair share of overplayed ecchi tropes sprinkled in. But overall, I kinda enjoyed it, so I will be putting it in B tier. I am really excited about the anime airing this season. It obviously helps that season 4 of my favorite anime of all time is airing this season as well, but I feel like there's rarely been a season with this many great new anime I feel like I absolutely have to watch. From Meteor Girl Overdose, Agent of the Four Seasons, to Hat Atelier, to Ramparts of Ice, there's absolutely an amazing show for every type of anime fan this season. I hope this video helped choosing what new anime to watch this season, and if you disagree with any of these ratings, feel free to leave your feedback in the comments. As always, thanks for watching.